What's up guys, Mike Thomas, aka The Young Trishula here. Today I wanted to talk about some new cards that were revealed in the OCG for the upcoming Tactical Masters set. Tactical Masters will be releasing in the OCG on March 19th, so these cards will probably not be coming to the TCG for quite a while, but in the OCG these cards will be coming out soon, so we will see maybe a impact in the OCG metagame, and that I think is always important to pay attention to because OCG is always a somewhat reliable predictor of what the TCG metagame will look like in the intermediate future. Now, the new cards that were announced are the Labrynth archetype. There were 12 cards revealed, and I think the cards are actually kind of cool. And these cards were translated and posted on Twitter by Ready for Duel late last night. So I want to just kind of go over them with you guys today and put them out there and see what you guys think about these new cards, because I think they're pretty cool. So without wasting any more of your time, let's hop straight into these new cards. The first new card that we have is Labyrinth of Silver Palace. She is a level 8 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2900 attack and 1900 defense, so she's pretty thick, and she has 3 effects, the second and third of which you can only use each once per turn. So the first effect she has is a passive effect. Your opponent cannot activate monster effects in response to the activation of your normal trap cards. Her second effect is that you can target a normal trap card in your graveyard, set it to your field, but it cannot be activated unless you control a fiend monster, which she is, so not really much of a downside there. And the third effect, if a monster or monsters leave the field because of your normal trap card's effect, you can destroy 1 card your opponent controls or 1 card in their hand. So that's a really cool effect, really strong effect. This card basically turns Trap Hole into Dogmatica punishment. So the second card revealed is Labyrinth Archfiend, which does include the Archfiend keyword in its name unless that gets changed in a localization. It is a level 7 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2000 attack and 2800 defense, so another thick boy. Labyrinth Archfiend does have the restriction that you can only use its first and second effect of this card's name once per turn. If a trap card is activated, you can special summon it from your hand, and if it is special summoned, you can set a normal trap card that only activates if an effect is declared directly from your deck. So this card can summon itself and then set Mirror Force from your deck, for example. This card also has a third passive effect that it gains 400 attack for every normal trap in your graveyard with a different name. And on top of that, monsters your opponent controls cannot target fiend monsters that you control for attacks except for Labyrinth Archfiend. So this one's pretty generic, being able to summon itself and set cards like Mirror Force from your deck, so not too bad overall. The third card that was revealed is Labyrinth Servant Ariana. She is a level 4 fiend effect monster with 1600 attack and 2100 defense. She has the harshest restriction yet on any of the monsters. You can only use 1 of her 2 effects per turn and only once that turn. So you have to choose between her 2 effects. And sure, her effects are pretty good too. Her first effect is if this card is normal or special summon, you can add a Labyrinth card from your deck to your hand, except herself. So that means either monsters, spells, or traps. And then if a monster leaves your field because of a normal trap card's effect, you can draw a card, then special summon a fiend monster from your hand or set a spell trap from your hand. So Ariana seems really strong in that she can combine with Palace, allowing you to draw a card and then summon the Palace out. So if you have 2 trap cards that remove monsters from the field, you would be able to remove 1 monster from the field, summon out the Palace, draw a card, and then if you remove another monster from the field, Palace triggers and pops 2. We've yet to see the rest of the archetype yet, but even as a standalone card, I think Ariana is actually pretty strong. Next, we have Labyrinth Chandra, a play on Chandelier plus Dragon. As you can see, there's a dragon head on the top of this little chandelier, so kind of a cool looking card. The Chandra is a level 3 Dark Fiend effect monster with 1500 attack and no defense. Like the rest of them, you can only use its first and second effect once per turn. It has a quick effect to send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard and discard a card to set a Labyrinth spell trap from your hand or deck to the field. So it is a neg 1 at first. However, its second effect is that if a monster leaves the field by your normal trap card's effect while this card's in your graveyard, you can add it back to your hand. Chandra here is actually pretty solid. It's always really good when a consistency card adds itself back to your hand. So the steep cost of activating it is kind of balanced out by the fact that it can get itself back, and because it does set from deck, it cannot be interacted with cards like Ash Blossom. So I think Chandra is actually pretty good. Not only that, but it also kind of fixes the problem of trap trap decks in general that you can't really go second with them, because with Chandra, since it is a quick effect, you can use its effect on your opponent's first turn. Say you're going second, use its effect, set a trap card from your deck, then at the start of your turn you could use that trap card and trigger all of your Labyrinth effects that trigger when a trap card activates. The next Labyrinth that was revealed is Labrynth Stovey, which is a level 2 Dark Fiend effect monster with no attack but 2000 defense, and continuing the trend, you can only use its first and a second effect once per turn. So its first effect is another quick effect. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard and discard a card to set a Labyrinth spell trap from your hand or deck to the field. So the same first effect as Chandra. However, the second effect is that if a monster leaves the field by your normal trap card's effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card. This is actually really interesting. So this card is actually pretty solid because it is like Chandra, however it can summon itself, and because it can send itself from the hand or field just like Chandra, this one actually might be better than Chandra because it effectively does the exact same thing, just you can choose to keep the body on the field rather than put it into your hand. Pretty good, pretty good. Now the final monster that was revealed for the Labyrinth archetype was the Labrynth Clock, which is a level 1 Dark Fiend effect monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. Following in theme, you can only use its effects once per turn. So its first effect, you can discard just this card, so it does not need to discard another card alongside it like the other two. And its effect is this turn, while you control a Labyrinth monster, you can activate one normal trap the turn it was set. So this card is kind of like a in-theme Makiura the Destructor, which is potentially good. And the second effect is if you send a card from your hand to the graveyard to activate a Labyrinth card's effect except itself or a normal trap card while this card is in the graveyard, you can either add it to your hand or special summon it. So because of this, you will actually get a little bit more value out of this card. So if you were to combine the Clock with, say, Stovey, for example, you could summon out the Clock and you could set a trap card from your deck with the Stovey, get back the Clock, and potentially combo from there or make some kind of a play. So it's nice that this deck is not just completely neg and that you don't just throw all of your cards into the graveyard for no effect. It's nice that you have ways to get them back into play. So the next card that we have is Labrynth, the field spell. Not a very creative name, but you can only use its first and second effects once per turn, staying in theme with the rest of these cards. Its first effect is that if you activate a set Welcome Labyrinth normal trap card, you can add this additional effect to Welcome Labyrinth's effect is destroy one card on the field. Then moving on to the second effect, if you activate a non-Labyrinth normal trap card, you can special summon one fiend monster from your hand or graveyard. So the first effect is pretty interesting. It makes it so that there's clearly a way to pop cards on the field, triggering all of the secondary effects of these Labyrinth monsters that have an effect if a monster leaves the field because of a normal trap. So this card also makes it so that you can cheat out some of your Labyrinth monsters relatively easily, such as the Palace, the big boss monster. So it's nice to see that there is a way to cheat these cards out and that you do not have to, tribute summon a level 8 monster and then start flipping trap cards in order to get any sort of value out of them. Now for the second spell card, there is Labyrinth Setting, a quick play spell card. You can only activate one Labyrinth Setting per turn, or one card with this card's name per turn. You can target 2 of your Labyrinth spell traps that are banished and or in your graveyard except itself, shuffle them into the deck. Then if you control a fiend monster, you can set non-Labyrinth normal traps with different names from each other directly from your deck equal to the number of cards shuffled. This card seems really strong. So this card is effectively a +1 for trap decks that can set any normal trap from your deck. So you could use this to set Fiend Griefing and Ice Dragon's Prison, for example, which is just so insanely powerful. This card gives you a way to search some of the most powerful cards in the game just by playing this archetype. To me, that is absolutely crazy. Not only to mention that this is just recursion for the deck, the fact that it lets you search out any normal trap is so good, and that the only cost to this card is that you have to play Labyrinth cards in your deck and you have to control a fiend monster. All the Labyrinth monsters are fiends, and if you're already playing the Labyrinth deck, you're going to be playing fiend monsters. So this card just seems crazy to me. This card to me is so far the best card that's been revealed. Now we are finally into the trap cards in the deck, and this is Welcome Labyrinth. We saw this card mentioned in the text of Labyrinth. So this is probably the main trap card of the deck. So this card, like many of the other cards in this archetype, you can only use its first and second effect once per turn. Its first effect is that you can special summon a Labyrinth monster from your deck, but you cannot special summon monsters from the deck and extra deck until the end of the next turn after this card was dissolves except Fiend monsters. So this card is kind of like Dogmatica Punishment, except it says except Fiend monsters. And all of the cards in this deck are fiends. So that's like not really a downside. So this card is just a emergency teleport that emergency teleports out the Palace, the level 8 boss. And then if you have the field spell up, it would also pop a card and trigger Palace. So this card right away is really strong. Just in my mind, this card is immediately really strong. Its second effect is if a monster leaves the field by a normal trap card's effect while this card's in your graveyard, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can set it to your field. That's not bad at all. The fact that it's recursion, the fact that it can come back and it doesn't banish itself when it leaves the field. So if you're playing a lot of cards that just remove monsters from the field, you can just get this card back every turn. Second trap card that was revealed is Fair Welcome Labyrinth. So similar to Welcome Labyrinth, we now have Fair Welcome Labyrinth. So this one only has one effect. This is the first card that we've seen in the archetype that only has one effect. When a monster declares an attack, if you control a fiend monster, target a card on the field, negate the attack, and if you do, destroy that card. Then you can set a non-labyrinth normal trap from your hand or deck to the field. To break that down, this card is Sakuretsu Armor, but if you control a fiend monster, this card can set any normal trap from your deck. This card is both Sakuretsu Armor and Trap Trick in the same card. That's so goofy on so many levels. All right, so the next trap card we have is Labyrinth Barrage. When you activate a set normal trap card except Labyrinth Barrage, your opponent takes no further damage from card effects until the end of their next turn after this card resolves. Also, this card's effect becomes that normal trap card's effect when that card is activated. What? Is this card just Gravedigger but for traps? So this card just copies the effect of another trap card that you use. Kind of cool. This card's actually generic too, so this card might see play outside of the Labyrinth deck. But this is cool because it allows you to get around the restriction of cards like, say, Ice Dragon's Prison, where you can only use the effect of Ice Dragon's Prison once per turn. You can just copy Ice Dragon's Prison. Now, the only problem with Labyrinth Barrage is that you would have to want to use it twice in succession. You wouldn't be able to stagger it, like you go Ice Dragon's Prison, then your opponent makes a play, and then you Ice Dragon's Prison them again. You would just flip 2 Ice Dragon's Prisons like at the same time. So that's kind of neat. There's probably some cool applications of this card that I can't really think of at the moment, but I think it's cool. I also think it's good that they included the card text. You can't use extra burn damage on your opponent with this, so that you can't copy Secret Barrel. Thankfully, this is not chain burn support, but I think this card's neat. Like, this is a really neat card that I think we'll see play even outside of the Labyrinth deck. I think this card's really cool. Now, the final card revealed is Archfiend Glitch, which is interesting because this is just Archfiend support. This isn't even a Labyrinth support. So I don't know if this card's name is going to get changed when it gets imported to the TCG. But for now, this is Archfiend support. And this card says, if you control a fiend monster, target a card on the field, destroy it. Then you can send one fiend monster from your deck to the graveyard. So this card is fiend griefing, but it interacts with the board instead of the graveyard. This card is insane. This is probably the best card we've seen so far. That's crazy. You don't even need to play this in Labyrinth. You can just play this in Burning Abyss. You're just sitting on a fiend monster, and then you just pop. They gave Burning Abyss Dogmatic Punishment, but for no extra deck restriction. So you can target a card on your opponent's field, pop it, and it doesn't even have to be a monster. It can be a spell trap. Pop it, and then you send Farfa to your graveyard. Or if you're playing against a back row deck, you can play Calcab and send Calcab to your graveyard and bounce a back row. This card is insane. All right, I like this card a lot. This is my favorite card from the Archetype. So to kind of wrap things up, guys, just going over this deck. This deck seems really cool. There's some really cool generic trap cards in this archetype or adjacent to this archetype. I don't really know what to make too much of this archetype. I'm not sure if this will become a deck in its own right or if this will just become trap BA support in the future. But as always, I am interested to hear what you guys think about these new cards. So go ahead and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about these cards. If there is some cool interaction that maybe I haven't thought of that you see with these cards, maybe some cool application, let me know. I would love to hear about that. But if you did enjoy this video, you think these cards are interesting, go ahead and drop this video a like. It does help out the channel a lot. Or consider subscribing. The channel has been growing so much lately, and I would love for you to be a part of that growth. That's about all I have for you guys today. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video.